Why are food stamps called stamps? The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program here in the United States, SNAP, is you get a card, like a preloaded debit card kind of a thing. That way, the bureaucrats can keep track of whether you used up all your worth as a person this month or whatever. But they're not stamps. So what does that mean? Well, I found the answer dating back to World War II, probably World War One, but my answer came from a little piece of family ephemera that's been passed down since World War II. This was my great grandmother Armintha Kaiser's a war ration book from World War II. This is 1942. Civilians really got on board with rationing during the world wars in the 20th century because they didn't have a choice. It was total war. And so everybody had to do their part, as they say. And as the government writes from the printing office on the very back here, if you don't need it, don't buy it, which is still good advice. But the answer to my initial question about food stamps, sometimes you might hear them called green stamps. It's not a clerk with an ink stamp making sure you've done your customer loyalty program. It is, in fact, little stamps, just like in this ration book. These are blue. Green stamps are green, or they were. Those were food stamps. These are also for food, but the different kinds kind of depends. You see different demarcations and amounts. Grain, sugar, meat, that kind of thing, fat, butter. Yeah, the reason it's like this in this stamp book, well, there was a black market. People would loosen these books, they would get the stamps out of them. And if you weren't going to use your rations, why wouldn't you just give them to someone else so they could have more? Like that's it actually seems like it should be allowed. But anyway, it wasn't. They needed to keep track of these things, right? This is all a matter of accounting for the war effort. So what it meant was you had to come in with your booklet with your name on it, and the clerk had to take the stamp out themselves to prevent, I guess, black marketeering. So that's kind of interesting. That's where the answer to that food stamp question comes from. Eventually, obviously, they replaced it with cards. But yeah, I think that's fascinating. It's kind of cool to connect something like that to this weird point in history that we all know about and are maybe interested about in World War II. Speaking of World War II, this is the part where you can keep scrolling if you're not interested in books, but link in bio, I got some really good World War II era books up there. This one in particular is The Use of Air Power by Flight Lieutenant Blunt from the Royal Air Force, written during the Second World War, excuse me, and then published in America in 1943. This was relatively controversial when it first came out within certain sectors of the British government, I think, but it was eventually embraced, as you can see, because there's a comment in the beginning, a kind of foreword written by then Prime Minister Winston Churchill, upon whom I will not comment at this moment. But anyway, it's got a really cool cover from this era artist, Ernest Baker. And but we may have seen similar images to this before. This series of hammers, each depicting the Allied forces coming down on this well-recognized symbol of hate, let's call it. And sorry to the cultures that have traditionally used that as a symbol of good fortune. But anyway, this book is not worth that much by itself, right? I mean, it's a first edition, first printing, American printing rather, first thus, as they say. It's got the original dust jacket. It's in pretty decent shape, besides a little hole punched back here. It's got this Brodart protective cover. But still, it's just not that interesting until I noticed this book plate in here. I didn't know who M. Carl Haddon was, but based on the engineering-related oscilloscope and slide rule and all that good stuff, I kind of assumed he was an engineer, and sure enough, he was an engineer. In fact, he was the chief engineer of Lockheed California, not Lockheed Cauliflower, for many years, and eventually got promoted to executive vice president of Lockheed in the late 1960s. And at the time of the publication of this book, likely when he bought it, during the war, he was working at Lockheed California on the replacement to the P-38 Lightning aircraft. It was supposed to be the X-49, which never got completed, but that's what he was working on, likely when he bought this book, The Use of Air Power, and it's possible that this inspired some of his work later on. So that's what makes this book valuable, and hey, go buy it if you want. Otherwise, now you know cool facts, and you can amaze your friends by knowing the answer to that constantly persistent question.